Greetings, dear listeners. From where do you join us this evening, seeking the stillness of ancient sands and the quiet wisdom of ages past? May the shadows of the Great Plateau fall gently upon your spirit, drawing you away from the worries of the day and toward the serene knowledge that resides only in stone and silence. We turn our gaze now toward Kemet, the old keeper of the sacred ledger, who sits where the dust of 3,000 years gathers, watching the sun abandon the western desert. Kemet was not a priest of the living pharaoh, nor a wealthy noble, but simply a man who remembered the voices of the builders, holding the blueprints of memory deep within his aged heart. He sat now upon a weathered block of limestone, perfectly squared yet discarded long ago, feeling the cool descent of the evening air that carried with it the scent of dry earth and the distant, slow-moving river. Above him rose the immense, silent mass of the Great Pyramid, its sides glowing momentarily with a final magnificent copper light before surrendering fully to the deep indigo of the coming night. This colossal monument was not merely a tomb, Kemet knew, but a fixed point in the rushing stream of time, an arrow pointing eternally toward the circumpolar stars. He closed his eyes and allowed the rhythmic whisper of the past to begin, recalling the days when the plateau was not silent but roared with the sounds of human effort and sacred command. The air vibrated constantly with the steady chipping of diorite hammers against hard granite, a sound that spoke not of burden but of intense, focused devotion to the divine geometry. Tens of thousands of hands, guided by the precise vision of the celestial architect, worked tirelessly to ensure that every massive stone block settled into its predestined place, aligned not merely with the next stone, but with the very axis of the turning sky. Even the simple placement of a corner block required the utmost precision, for the entire structure was intended to be an immutable map of the heavens, frozen forever in earthly material. The true secret of the pyramids, Kemet often mused, lay hidden not in buried treasure or hidden rooms, but in the meticulous angles that connected the base to the vanishing point of the apex. These slopes, identical on all four sides, were calculated to reflect the specific angle of ascension required by the pharaoh Khufu's spirit to join the immortal, undying stars, known to the astronomers as the Ankh. The lines were drawn in such perfection that they seemed to stretch out beyond the terrestrial realm, communicating directly with the soul of the cosmos and acting as solid, unbreakable paths for the king's transition from mortal ruler to eternal God. It was a mathematics understood only by those who saw stone not as rock, but as compressed, ancient light. Kemet remembered the endless processions, the slow, agonizing journey of the Tura limestone blocks, polished white and shining like the moon, towed upstream on great barges from the far banks of the Nile. It was a river of stone flowing toward the desert, managed by teams who understood the delicate balance between sheer human power and the subtle, aiding forces of nature. The blocks seemed to glide on the moist, packed earth, lubricated by the very dedication of those who moved them, responding to chants that measured time not by hours, but by the movement of the sun across the sky and the rising of the Nile flood. Every stone was treated with reverence, for it was destined to be a permanent piece of Ra's shadow upon the land. The old keeper shifted slightly on his stone seat, running a weathered hand across the coarse grain of the limestone, feeling the memory of the long-lost casing stones that once shimmered like polished ivory under the bright desert sun. These outer slabs, now mostly stripped away by later generations for use in distant, lesser structures, held the pyramid's final layer of magic, a surface so smooth and dazzling that travelers from far-off lands believed the structure was cast from a single, supernatural block of pure white fire. When the sun struck the apex, the entire monument would flare like a beacon, communicating the eternal glory of Egypt to the farthest reaches of the known world, a testament to enduring power. Deep inside the massive heart of the structure, in the solemn, silent chambers, lay a different kind of secret, a profound stillness achieved by sheer mass and geometrical isolation. Kemet had entered the king's chamber only once, long ago as a boy following his father, and the memory of the experience remained etched upon his consciousness like hieroglyphs carved in obsidian. The air within was impossibly cool and dry, a pristine atmosphere untainted by the breath of the world outside, and the resonance of the massive granite sarcophagus seemed to hum with a low, fundamental note, vibrating with the very energy of the earth itself. It felt less like a tomb and more like the beating heart of a giant, sleeping deity. This immense granite box, perfectly sized for its eternal resident, was not meant simply to contain the physical remains, but to focus and amplify the spiritual energies released by the transition of the pharaohs Ka and Ba. It was placed exactly beneath the center of the pyramid, the geometric focus point, ensuring that the deceased king could utilize the structure as a grand spiritual mechanism, a machine for eternity, constantly receiving and projecting celestial influence. The very hardness of the granite walls, resistant to time and erosion, promised an immortality that the fleeting wooden shrines of lesser men could never offer. Kemet recalled the legends whispered among the elders concerning the hidden significance of the Great Pyramids' relationship to the surrounding landscape, particularly the deep, unseen arteries of the earth. It was said that the structure was deliberately placed over a subterranean confluence of waters, where the hidden currents of the land intersected with specific magnetic lines running north to south. This precise placement ensured that the pyramid acted as an anchor, drawing stabilizing energy from the planet's core and channeling the protective powers of the goddess Nut toward the pharaoh, safeguarding him against the chaos of the underworld journey. The physical form was thus wedded to the spiritual architecture of the world. He looked up at the silhouette now, sharp and unwavering against the night sky, and noted the precise alignment of the main causeway, which pointed directly toward the rising of the sun on the day of the solstice, celebrating the rebirth of Ra. The entire complex was a giant calendar, a measure of slow, majestic cosmic cycles that put the brief lifespan of man into humbling perspective. Empires crumbled, dynasties vanished into the sand, and the memory of powerful kings faded to dust. Yet the solid, triangular form remained, silently charting the passage of the stars across its peak. The final secret, Kemet realized as the first true stars began to pierce the velvet darkness, was the simplest and most profound. The pyramids hold no secret at all. They reveal everything, but only to those who possess the patience to look beyond the stone and truly observe the enduring, eloquent simplicity of form, scale, and function. They stand as a magnificent declaration that the greatest aspirations of mankind, when built upon the foundation of divine knowledge and perfect mathematics, can indeed triumph over the slow, inevitable tyranny of time. This silent, beautiful truth was the true legacy Khufu bequeathed to all future generations. Kemet eventually lay back fully upon the weathered stone, pulling his worn linen shawl tighter around his shoulders, feeling the comforting weight of the millennia pressing down around him. The cool breeze carried the distant sound of the Nile's water moving steadily toward the sea, a sound that harmonized with the low, eternal hum of the colossal stones surrounding him. He closed his eyes, his consciousness merging peacefully with the deep, quiet knowledge held within the ancient plateau, ready to drift into the deep and protected sleep offered only by the unwavering shadows of the great silent watchers. May your rest be equally still, and your dreams as enduring as the memory held within the sacred granite. Greetings, dear listeners. From where do you join us this evening? Kemet's breath deepened, slowing to match the vast, unhurried rhythm of the desert night. The world narrowed down to the cool, gritty texture beneath his back and the limitless expanse of the star-flecked sky above. He felt himself sinking, not into the stone itself, but into the memory held within the stone, a powerful, silent current flowing from the deepest foundations of the earth toward the celestial apexes. This sleep was not an escape from wakefulness, but a deeper form of observation, where the chatter of the conscious mind finally ceded its domain to the ancient wisdom sleeping in the very bones of the land. Greetings, dear listeners. From where do you join us this evening? As the final vestiges of waking thought dissolved, a profound vision unfolded behind his closed lids, not of pharaohs adorned in gilded splendor, but of mathematicians draped in simple linen, moving with an astonishing, silent purpose across the plateau. He saw the vast plains suddenly alive with measured activity, where every rope was drawn taut and precisely calculated, and every shadow cast by the rising sun marked an essential point in a cosmic blueprint that dictated the precise placement of every block. These were the true architects, men who understood that the foundation of eternity was not brute force, but flawless geometry and an unwavering respect for the divine proportionality that governed the movement of the stars and the flow of the river. The monumental blocks of limestone and granite began to glide through the vision, not hauled by desperate human toil alone, but seemingly guided by an unseen current of unified will and perfect balance. Kemet understood that the sheer weight of the stone was inconsequential compared to the weight of the collective focus, 1,000 men moving as one breath, adhering to a single resonant frequency struck deep within the desert earth by the master surveyors. He witnessed the precise placement of the highly polished casing stones, gleaming white under the fierce, newly risen sun, creating slopes so flawlessly aligned they seemed drawn by the hand of the very celestial messenger Thoth himself upon the tan desert canvas. His consciousness was then drawn into the very heart of the structure, past the grand gallery that seemed to ascend endlessly into the dark heavens, and finally into the austere, echoing silence of the king's chamber. Here, the deep red granite sang a low, protective tone that resonated against his inner ear, and the colossal, solid mass of masonry above the relieving chambers spoke not of burial and darkness, but of ascension and light. It was revealed as a massive, meticulously engineered spiritual engine designed to harness the energy of the earth and the heavens, launching the soul into the eternal celestial river that flowed far above the mundane earth. The chamber was a space built not primarily for the frail and temporary physical body, but for the Ka, the vital essence of the king that required the perfect alignment of terrestrial architecture and cosmic geometry to continue its unending journey through the duat. Kemet felt the truth of the pyramids settle deep within his bones. They are ultimately temples of measurement, constructed to calibrate human effort against the vastness of cosmic time, reminding every future generation that transcendent perfection is indeed achievable through disciplined intention and sacred mathematics. This was the silent, beautiful architecture of belief, requiring neither inscription nor sermon, but only the sheer presence of its perfectly ordered form. Greetings, dear listeners. From where do you join us this evening? He turned his gaze toward the great, lidless granite coffer, which stood silently in the center of the chamber like an altar awaiting a profound offering. This was no mere burial receptacle for the temporary physical shell, but a tuning fork of immense antiquity, carved from a single block of dark, enduring stone, meant to hold the vibrational signature of the ascended spirit. As Kemet placed his hand upon its cooled surface, he felt the faint yet unmistakable echo of the primordial sounds used by the builders to align the king's soul with the North Star and the imperishable circumpolar constellation. It pulsed with a low frequency, a heartbeat rhythm set to the silent cycles of the millennia, acting as the spiritual engine's primary conductor and focal point for the transformation ritual. Kemet understood then why the walls bore no lengthy hieroglyphic narrative, no boastful record of temporal conquests, unlike the tombs of lesser, later pharaohs scattered across the plains. The builders of this primal age understood that true wisdom must guard itself against the careless gaze of the uninitiated, requiring the seeker to arrive at understanding through dedicated effort and purity of heart alone. They carved their essential sermons not in shallow relief upon the stuccoed walls, but directly into the very dimensions and angles of the stone, creating a massive physical riddle that only the mathematically enlightened or the truly spiritually attuned could decipher. This vast, deliberate silence was the loudest teaching of all, demanding reverence and requiring the inner ear to be cleansed of all worldly clamor before the sacred geometric knowledge could be properly imparted. His eyes drifted upward towards the openings of the narrow shafts that pierced the immense weight of the masonry, extending outward toward the specific stellar coordinates that marked the destination of the perfected Ba, the mobile aspect of the soul. These were most assuredly not ventilation ducts for the mortal living, as some short-sighted historians carelessly supposed in later years, but meticulously engineered conduits of celestial egress, pathways carved from solid rock to guide the royal spirit's return to its starseed origin. They were aimed with breathtaking precision towards the permanent pole of the northern sky and the belt of Orion, mapping the geography of the heavens as meticulously as the ancient surveyors mapped the terrestrial banks of the great river Nile. It was a profound and tangible guarantee, written eternally in stone and starlight, assuring the resurrected king that his path to eternal perpetuity was fixed and entirely unalterable by the fleeting chaos of the mundane, earthly world. As he stood in that resonant sanctuary, Kemet felt the truth of the foundation rise up through the polished floor beneath his sandaled feet, a primal current drawn from the very mantle of the nourishing earth itself. He realized that the Great Pyramid was not placed randomly upon the broad, windswept plateau of Giza, but sited exactly upon a nodal point of tremendous telluric energy, a precise confluence where the powerful forces of the Earth's deep core intersected with the magnetic lines flowing steadily from the distant celestial equator. The refined geometry of the immense structure was thus designed to act not merely as a monument, but as a colossal accumulator and a subtle energy transformer, drawing this raw terrestrial power upward and refining it within the elevated chambers for the use of the transcendent spirit. The entire mountain of stone acted as a powerful, constantly charging battery, maintaining its energetic state through perfect alignment with the planet's fundamental rhythmic pulse. A magnificent, overwhelming vision then completely overtook his focused mind, revealing the true nature of the structure's inner space, not merely as empty rooms holding air, but as consecrated vessels holding vibrational memory, an invisible and immeasurable library of the first time, the Zep Tepi. He perceived the builders not as mere sweat-stained laborers dragging stones with brute force, but as high initiates and astronomer priests, men who worked with sacred mathematics derived directly from the original, foundational cosmic blueprint. This essential knowledge, the complex understanding of how to weave light into physical matter, how to manipulate the fabric of space and time through the application of perfected sound and geometric harmony, was entirely encoded into the structure's dimensions themselves, waiting patiently for the worthy initiate to discover and unlock the key. It stood as a powerful, enduring testament to a golden age of profound comprehension, an age long since forgotten by the struggling, chaotic generations who followed in its shadow. He understood that the precision inherent in every line and every angled corner was a spiritual imperative, teaching humanity that the path to transcendence required absolute adherence to order and disciplined intention, rejecting the sloth and carelessness of the ordinary life. The minuscule errors, the deliberate slight imperfections woven into the vast design, served only as a signature of the mortal hand attempting the divine, a necessary humility before the boundless perfection of the Creator's own design. This architectural feat was a physicalized prayer, a sustained meditation upon the concept of eternity, requiring more devotion and purity of purpose than any chant or spoken ritual could ever hope to convey. Kemet reluctantly turned his attention and his feet to leave the profound quiet of the king's chamber, knowing that his brief stay, measured only in heartbeats and profound breaths, had utterly recalibrated his entire understanding of existence and his purpose within it. He moved slowly back through the narrow, descending passage, feeling the immense, comforting weight of the structure pressing in from every side, yet no longer feeling confined, but completely protected by the sheer magnitude of the divine intent behind the meticulously stacked stone. As he emerged through the relatively small entrance aperture and stepped back onto the exposed, cool sands of the Giza Plateau, the eastern horizon was beginning to glow with the brilliant, fierce promise of Ra's rising chariot, ready to commence its daily journey across the celestial ocean. The vastness of the imposing structure now seemed less like a somber tomb and infinitely more like a colossal, living map of immortality, waiting patiently for the coming ages to unfold, continuing its silent, profound work of spiritual elevation. He stood there gazing upward at the magnificent apex, its original golden capstone long since vanished by the greedy hands of time, but its spiritual intention still reaching high into the clear cobalt sky, a singular, stable point around which the entire history of Kemet revolved in cyclical fashion. The greatest and most enduring secret held within the very heart of the pyramid was ultimately not how the massive stones were quarried, or how the complex ramps were constructed, technical wonders though they remain, but the absolute and unwavering certainty of the ancient priesthood regarding the necessary, cyclical nature of life, death, and inevitable resurrection. This colossal edifice was the definitive, unshakable statement of eternal life, a beautiful mathematical proof carved meticulously into the very face of the earth, proclaiming to all future generations that true mastery lies in navigating the journey of the soul, and not merely in ruling the brief and fleeting span of mortal years. This crucial foundational knowledge was the true legacy they left to the children of the future, a silent beacon of measured hope and perfect geometric truth that would endure long after the names of the kings who built it had faded into legend. The desert air, now warming with the arrival of the great sun, seemed charged with latent power, reflecting the energy that Kemet now knew flowed continually through the deep heart of the stone mountain before him. He realized that the pyramids were not just monuments facing the present, but gigantic instruments aimed squarely at the future, preserving essential truths through millennia of human ignorance and warfare, patiently awaiting the return of an age capable of understanding their function. They were silent teachers of geometry, astronomy, and transcendent physics, their lessons whispered not through the mouth of a priest, but through the perfect arrangement of granite and limestone, echoing the cosmic harmony of the spheres. Greetings, dear listeners. From where do you join us this evening? Kemet lowered himself closer to the vast base, placing his hand upon the colossal limestone casing stones, which, despite their age, still radiated a slow, steady warmth drawn deep from the Earth's core and captured by the rising sun. He could feel a measured, rhythmic thrumming deep within the heart of the rock, not the vibration of shifting sand or passing time, but the quiet resonance of immense, structured energy, a vibration consciously tuned, he believed, to the planet's own deep magnetic pulse. It was evident that the great builders had understood the Earth not as inert matter to be piled high, but as a living entity, and had fashioned this mountain to act as a profound and steady tuning fork, harmonizing the terrestrial essence with the invisible flow of the heavens above and the deep currents that move beneath the surface of the land. His eyes traced the perfect line of the edges, following the sharp, straight slope that rose steeply toward the heavens, recognizing the sheer, unimaginable precision required to maintain such geometric integrity across a structure of this colossal scale. This magnificent precision spoke not merely of powerful rule or the capacity for endless labor, but of a sacred geometry understood at a fundamental, spiritual level, where every angle and proportion was intended to mimic the divine ratios governing the movement of stars and the fundamental creation of all structured life. He understood now that any deviation, even a hair's breadth across the great face, would have corrupted the integrity of the instrument, rendering its critical, cosmic function mute and meaningless to the currents it was meant to guide. This knowledge made the pyramid not just a place of honor, but a mechanism of absolute truth, intolerant of imperfection and demanding mastery in its creation. Kemet turned his gaze slowly to the north face, locating the high, hidden entrance, the very threshold where the soul was said to begin its challenging ascent, leaving the mortal body behind like a worn garment abandoned at the river's edge. He mused upon the long, narrow, and arduous path that led upward into the very core, the constricted galleries designed to compel the initiate or the resurrected soul to focus solely inward, shedding all earthly distraction through physical rigor, deep darkness, and the profound, demanding silence of the stone. The path through the heart of the mountain was a deliberate, controlled journey through the deepest, most challenging aspects of the psyche, mirroring the necessary spiritual tests faced by the deceased navigating the duat, the shadowy realm of profound transformation and ultimate judgment. The king's chamber, resting at the very nexus of the structure, was not, he realized fully now, a resting place for bones and funerary objects, but a crucial staging point, a sealed environment, crafted entirely of the finest Aswan granite, stone renowned for its high quartz content and unique ability to interact powerfully with atmospheric and stellar radiation. This chamber, devoid of decoration and dominated only by the monolithic, resonant sarcophagus, was a focused place of intense, sustained pressure, designed specifically to hold and concentrate the forces gathered from the four cardinal directions and channeled by the descending shafts. It was conceived as a high-energy crucible, capable of either accelerating the transformation of the soul, or perhaps, for those still living, acting as a profound chamber of ultimate, final initiation, dissolving the barriers between the mortal self and the boundless, eternal spirit. He remembered the fragmented texts he had studied years before, which spoke of the Star Watchers who governed the construction, men whose knowledge extended far beyond the visible horizon and into the deep, invisible mechanics of the cosmos. They used not common tools of the smith, but subtle instruments of measurement that responded only to light, shadow, and the exact position of the celestial clock above, ensuring the alignment was perfect not just for the year it was built, but for the entire cycle of precession that spans more than 25,000 years. The pyramids were thus living calendars, marking not weeks and months, but epochs and cosmic eras, silently recording the slow dance of Sahu, Orion, and the unwavering station of the imperishable stars, the circumpolar deities. The weight of the stones above him, millions upon millions of tons pressing down, suddenly felt less like oppression and more like a profound act of divine stabilization, anchoring the delicate energetic process within the chamber, shielding it from all interference from the shifting surface world. This immense pressure stabilized the captured energy, allowing the transformation or transmission to occur with unwavering certainty and without dissipation. A colossal mechanism built for permanence rather than temporary shelter. The builders understood that only eternity could truly test the power of their art, and so they made their final great work eternal, impervious to the brief burning rage of war or the slow gnawing hunger of simple time. Kemet began to walk the perimeter again, finding a rhythm in his steps that mirrored the slow, steady tick of the planetary pulse he had sensed in the rock, his mind wrestling with the philosophical magnitude of this engineered spiritual permanence. He understood that the greatest fear of the ancients was not destruction by an enemy, but the loss of vital, foundational knowledge that ensured the successful navigation of the soul's journey beyond the sun. Hence, the secret was encrypted within the stone itself, written in the universal language of mathematics and geometry, a language that could never be defaced by invaders or lost to the changing dialects of men. This encoding required a profound discipline from the priesthood, demanding they place their most sacred truths in a form so monumental and yet so obscure that only the highest minds, working across thousands of years, could ever hope to decipher its profound layered meaning. The common people saw only a tomb, the invaders saw only high stone to plunder, and the ignorant saw only the vanity of a king. But the true seeker, the one who measured the stars and calculated the depth of the earth, would inevitably find the key residing in the perfect, unsettling harmony of the slopes and the silent mathematical resonance of the materials used. The secret was perfectly hidden in plain sight, protected by its own sheer immensity. He reflected that the preservation of this spiritual physics was their true enduring gift to the future children of Kemet and indeed to all humanity. A guiding lamp built of solid, unyielding stone, intended to burn steadily even through the darkest ages of forgetfulness and chaos that were prophesied to follow the end of the great dynasties. The pyramid stood as the defiant, unshakable promise that the cycles of existence were true, that death was merely a transition, and that the path toward ultimate, divine reunion was charted, measured, and eternally preserved within the granite core of this earthly star. The heat now fully embraced the desert, pressing upon Kemet with a weighty silence, yet he felt no fatigue, only a deepening clarity as his personal consciousness began to align with the deep, unwavering purpose of the ancient structure before him. He realized that the secrets were not merely intellectual puzzles to be solved, but energetic states to be entered and embodied, demanding a corresponding elevation of spirit and rigorous purification of the body, just as the texts of initiation had always warned. To truly know the pyramid was not to read about it, but to become a small, perfectly aligned part of its magnificent cosmic circuit, allowing the immense forces within the stone to recalibrate the soul to the frequency of eternity itself. Greetings, dear listeners. From where do you join us this evening? We return now to the sands of Kemet, where the initiate stands bathed in the profound energy radiating from the monumental geometry before him, an energy far older than the river Nile itself. This realization of embodied knowledge led him to extend his hand, not to touch the physical casing stone, but to feel the invisible, palpable field of ordered creation that pulsed rhythmically through the limestone and granite mass. He recognized this slow, deep vibration as the very breath of the earth, amplified and directed skyward by the meticulous placement and calculation of the master builders who mapped the heavens onto the terrestrial realm. As his palm approached the silent stone face, a faint, humming warmth traversed his arm, instantly settling within the deep marrow of his bones and calming the usually rapid oscillations of his mind. The Ka, or vital essence, within him felt immediately nourished and stabilized, drawing strength from the boundless reserves stored within the monument's heart, designed to perpetually recharge the spiritual batteries of the land. It was a physics utterly unlike the petty knowledge of mortal tools. This was the science of everlasting life, the perfect maintenance of the energetic body against the slow decay of time and material existence. The structure was a continuous, self-sustaining machine for immortality, its operation dependent only upon the eternal, celestial mechanics that govern the flow of the cosmos, providing a palpable anchor for the spirit attempting to navigate the vast ocean of existence. He turned then toward the northern entrance, a dark, solemn aperture that promised not darkness, but rather an intense focusing of light that lay beyond the visible spectrum. Stepping across the threshold, the oppressive heat of the desert instantly vanished, replaced by an eternal, dry coolness that spoke of perfect atmospheric stasis and masterful control over the elements, a testament to the ventilation shafts precisely aligned to capture prevailing air currents. The narrow ascending passage, angled precisely to align with the pole star Thuban, compelled him to walk in a posture of profound humility and focused intent, forcing the breath to deepen and the eyes to look inward rather than outward, initiating the shift from the mundane outer world to the sacred inner reality. The ascent culminated in the Grand Gallery, a spectacular vault of polished Tura limestone rising high above him like the inverted hull of a celestial ship, humming subtly with residual energy. He paused at the foot of this immense ramp, recognizing it immediately not as a mere walkway, but as a colossal resonator and waveguide, designed to collect and focus specific cosmic frequencies channeled from above and below the Earth's crust. The acoustic properties here were flawless, capable of generating sound fields that could physically interact with matter, a knowledge held sacred by the priests of the sound current, who understood vibration as the fundamental language of creation, and utilized specific vowel sounds to induce trance states. The intricate, stepped corbelling along the walls served as specific tuning forks, multiplying the power of the sacred names spoken during the rites of passage and lifting the consciousness of the initiated high above the dense materiality of the physical realm. He imagined the vast ceremonies that once took place here, the convergence of light, sound, and geometry, creating a temporary gateway for the soul to communicate directly with the ancestral intelligences of Orion and the Pleiades. The sheer mastery of the builders in controlling such powerful forces through architectural form instilled in him a deep reverence for the depth of their spiritual technology, which far surpassed the capabilities of any mere earthly kingdom. Finally, he reached the destination, the King's Chamber, built entirely of monolithic red Aswan granite, a material chosen not for its strength, but for its incredibly high quartz content, making the entire room a massive, living crystal oscillator. The air within this enclosed space felt thick and heavy, charged with an invisible electric potential that caused the fine hairs on his skin to stand erect in response to the focused ion field and the intense electromagnetic pressure. Here, in the perfect center of the mountain of stone, the four cardinal directions met. The vertical axis connected earth and sky through the alignment of the shafts, and time seemed to stretch and dissolve into an eternal now, a place where the consciousness of the initiate could shed the limitations of the mortal timeline. He approached the great, lidless granite coffer, which rested precisely upon the center line of the chamber, noting its dimensional harmony with the proportions of the entire Earth and its exact volume calibration to the Ark of the Covenant, as chronicled in later obscured texts. This vessel, carved from a single block, was never intended for the burial of a physical corpse, but rather served as the crucible for the ultimate alchemical transformation, the resurrection of the spirit body, the perfect merging of the Ba and the Ka into the shining Ach. It was a resonant bath designed to hold the initiated spirit during the period of transition, allowing the concentrated pyramidal energies to completely restructure the subtle anatomy according to the perfect blueprint of Osiris, the divine example of renewal. He laid his hand gently upon the cool, polished stone of the coffer, and the initiate received an immediate, overwhelming vision of the entire structure's ultimate function, a massive, functioning temple of transcendence, mapping the spiritual geography of the duat, the subtle underworld. The passages and chambers were not tombs, but physical representations of the initiatory paths the soul must navigate to achieve union with the divine source, Ra, mirroring the stars above in their perfect geometric relationships. The pyramid was, in essence, a complex three-dimensional teaching text encoded in geometry and mass, ensuring that even if all papyri were burned, the core wisdom of the Osirian mysteries would remain legible to any disciplined mind capable of reading the language of stone and sacred proportion. He understood then the boundless dedication and selfless labor demanded of the builders, who worked not for perishable fame or fleeting tribute, but purely for the establishment of cosmic order, Ma'at, upon the earth plane for generations yet unborn. Their consciousness was interwoven with every block laid, every angle measured, ensuring the purity of intent resonated through the millions of tons of material, thus guaranteeing the efficacy of the entire divine machine across millennia. They were astronomers, physicists, and high priests unified, crafting a legacy so vast that its purpose could only be comprehended by those who sought the same absolute clarity and purification they had achieved long ago, dedicating their lives entirely to the preservation of divine knowledge. A sudden, intense surge of energy, cold and pure as mountain spring water, rushed up through the granite floor and into his being, momentarily eclipsing the sensory world as the high-frequency charge resonated with his pineal gland. His mortal body became weightless, and he experienced a fleeting but absolute comprehension of the true celestial coordinates of the Earth, understanding its precise location within the great celestial rhythm as mapped by the belt of Orion and Sirius. In that moment of perfect alignment, the initiate was no longer merely a man standing in a stone room, but a focal point connecting the highest stars to the deepest roots of the planet, fulfilling the ancient promise that man could indeed become a god in Kemet, inheriting the mantle of the Neteru. This immense influx of structured knowledge did not come as words or symbols, but as pure, crystalline certainty, revealing the method by which consciousness itself could be engineered and sustained beyond the body's dissolution. He recognized the pyramid as a harmonic transformer, converting the raw, turbulent energy of the earth into the refined, organizing frequency required for the ascension of the spiritual body, essentially offering a perfected path to bypass the chaotic uncertainties of the afterlife journey. This was the ultimate gift of the Age of Light, a physical architecture for the soul's eternal liberation, demanding nothing but absolute truth and mastery from the one who dared to enter its deepest heart. This was the ultimate gift of the Age of Light, a physical architecture for the soul's eternal liberation. He withdrew his hand slowly from the coffer, the reverberations of the experience lingering in his heart like the sustained note of a sacred drum, feeling the weight and density of the atmosphere return gently around him. The lesson was clear. The great secret of the pyramids was not something stored within them, but something they constantly generated, offering the potential for transcendence to any soul willing to meet the rigorous demand for truth and inner silence. He settled back upon the cool, pristine floor, allowing the granite cage to continue its profound work upon his consciousness, knowing that the deepest mysteries required endless patience and the silent witnessing of one's own transformation under the unwavering gaze of eternity, holding the vibration of cosmic order within his renewed heart. The silence of the chamber was absolute, yet it was not empty. It was a pregnant silence, filled with the collective intentions of the ages, the unspoken prayers of countless generations who had sought the path of Ma'at through these sacred halls. He understood that his responsibility now extended beyond mere study. He was charged with holding this frequency, with carrying the blueprint of eternal renewal back into the world of men, allowing the calm wisdom absorbed from the stone to guide his every word and deed. The pyramid had conferred upon him the burden and blessing of memory, ensuring the light of Kemet would never truly fade, but merely await rediscovery by those pure of heart. Greetings, dear listeners. From where do you join us this evening? He settled back upon the cool, pristine floor, allowing the granite cage to continue its profound work upon his consciousness, knowing that the deepest mysteries required endless patience and the silent witnessing of one's own transformation under the unwavering gaze of eternity, holding the vibration of cosmic order within his renewed heart. The silence of the chamber was absolute, yet it was not empty. It was a pregnant silence, filled with the collective intentions of the ages, the unspoken prayers of countless generations who had sought the path of Ma'at through these sacred halls. He understood that his responsibility now extended beyond mere study. He was charged with holding this frequency, with carrying the blueprint of eternal renewal back into the world of men, allowing the calm wisdom absorbed from the stone to guide his every word and deed. The pyramid had conferred upon him the burden and blessing of memory, ensuring the light of Kemet would never truly fade, but merely await rediscovery by those pure of heart. He rested there, absorbing the lingering cosmic energy that still shimmered in the air, a residue of the dimensional shift he had experienced, allowing the vastness he had encountered to settle into the finite vessel of his body. The floor beneath him felt profoundly cool and solid, grounding the immense spiritual charge that coursed through his veins, the sensation akin to the earth drawing lightning safely into its bosom. He noticed now a subtle, non-physical illumination emanating from the stone itself, a faint glow that required no lamp, confirming that the structure was indeed a stargate, a point where the celestial light entered the terrestrial sphere. When he finally moved, the motion felt like the slow turning of a planet, deliberate and immensely weighty. Every muscle and sinew remembered the silent perfection he had just witnessed, demanding that his physical form now mirror that absolute order. The air, thick with ozone and the scent of antiquity, tasted like distant rain and cold metal upon his tongue, signaling the necessity of return to the realm where breath is still a struggle and time still holds sway over mortals. He rose slowly to his knees, placing a reverent palm upon the polished lip of the empty granite coffer, thanking the resonant vessel for holding the crucible of his transformation, confirming his readiness to bear witness to the eternal reality. Drawing his simple linen robe tighter around his shoulders, he turned his gaze toward the single narrow passage that led back into the labyrinthine darkness, realizing that the descent would be harder than the ascent, for carrying the light is heavier than seeking it. He retrieved the simple oil lamp he had left flickering near the entrance, its small flame now appearing almost shockingly vibrant against the monochrome grandeur of the king's chamber, a frail but necessary reminder of the temporal world he must re-enter. He paused for one final, long moment, imprinting the geometric perfection of the high chamber upon his inner vision, locking the resonance of the silent dimensions securely within his memory for the long journey ahead. Stepping through the low passage, he found himself once more within the steep incline of the Grand Gallery, a breathtaking canyon of polished limestone rising toward the forgotten stars. The sheer scale of the passage speaking volumes about the ambition of those who sought to elevate mankind toward the celestial heights. The sloping floor provided a natural momentum, urging him downward, a physical representation of the gravity of his new commitment to bring the sublime truth back to the mundane reality of the lower Nile Valley, where the cycles of life and death demanded practical wisdom. The acoustic properties of the gallery immediately shifted the atmosphere, replacing the pure tone of the chamber with a dynamic, vibrating stillness that seemed to amplify the subtle sounds of his own quiet breathing, making him hyper-aware of his finite existence within the infinite stone. As he walked, his hand trailing lightly along the highly polished, angled ramps that flanked the walkway, he sensed the incredible pressures held within the stones, visualizing the hundreds of feet of masonry above him, each block positioned not by chance, but by sacred geometry and mathematical precision to channel cosmic forces. He paused near one of the deep recesses carved into the gallery walls, understanding them not as simple construction niches, but as harmonic resonators, tuned to specific stellar frequencies that had once pulsed through the heart of the structure, setting the rhythm for initiations long since passed into legend. The builders of this magnificent tomb were true priests of gravity and light, capable of harnessing the deep earth forces and merging them with the distant, organizing principles of the cosmos, thus rendering the pyramid a living bridge between realms. Further down the gallery, approaching the junction where the ascending and descending passages met, a deep, cool draft of air reached him, carrying the damp scent of deep earth and ancient rock that marked the presence of the well shaft, the vertical artery plunging toward the bedrock below the entire construction. He had always seen this shaft as a mere engineering solution, a convenience for workmen, but now his elevated consciousness recognized it as the umbilicus mundi within the structure, symbolizing the necessary connection between the celestial quest and the dark, hidden root of terrestrial existence and the primordial past. This was the route taken by the soul when it consciously chose to plunge back into matter to undertake the difficult labor of manifestation, a descent requiring courage equal to the ascent he had just mastered in the higher chambers. He hesitated, his small lamp casting trembling shadows upon the mouth of the shaft. The cool air beckoned, urging him toward the path of deep introspection and geological memory, a route that few initiates dared to take, for it required facing the primordial chaos before organizing the self. Yet, his primary task now was not geological exploration, but the return to the light and the carrying of the renewed sacred fire to the world awaiting him above, outside the massive stone shell. He acknowledged the profound call of the deep, bowing his head in recognition of the eternal mystery held below, but consciously chose the horizontal, descending path of service that led back toward the known world and the awaiting sun. Following the lower angle, he soon entered the low, cramped corridor leading to the Queen's Chamber, a space often misunderstood by those who sought only the great chamber above, but which was vital in the complete architectural allegory, representing the heart of the manifested world, the chamber of the soul, or the Ka. Here, the masonry felt tighter, closer, demanding humility and a physical bending of the body, reminding him that the highest truths must often pass through the narrow confines of the human condition before being expressed fully in the outer life. The humidity in this passage was tangible, suggesting the vital presence of elemental forces, water and earth, in necessary contrast to the rarefied, fire-like air of the king's chamber high above. He entered the queen's chamber itself, standing before the perfectly smooth, slightly recessed niche in the eastern wall, which served as the altar for the unmanifested divine feminine principle, the silent mother of all becoming, the source of fertile potential. This chamber felt profoundly peaceful, a holding space where the raw, transformative energy he now carried could be nurtured and prepared for its outward expression, a final phase of tempering before the inevitable emergence into the light of day. He felt the ancient, maternal strength of the stones pressing gently upon him, offering silent benediction for the arduous work of teaching and leading that lay ahead in the bustling, sunlit world, understanding that the secret of the pyramid required not only masculine intellect but also nurturing feminine receptivity to be truly whole and effective. Having received the final blessing of the inner sanctums and integrated the dual lessons of force and form, the momentum of his purpose propelled him onward toward the horizontal passage that led eventually toward the main entrance, the slow, steady procession now feeling less like travel and more like the unwinding of a long-held breath. The echoing silence of the inner stone halls was beginning to be faintly pierced by the sounds of the distant world, the whisper of desert air, the faint cry of a scavenger bird high above the plateau, subtle reminders of the reality that awaited his return. He clutched the cool stone of the passage walls, ensuring his footsteps were measured and rhythmic, carrying the perfected frequency of the heart coffer out into the chaos that constantly demanded cosmic order. Greetings, dear listeners. From where do you join us this evening? Having received the final blessing of the inner sanctums and integrated the dual lessons of force and form, the momentum of his purpose propelled him onward toward the horizontal passage that led eventually toward the main entrance, the slow, steady procession now feeling less like travel and more like the unwinding of a long-held breath. The echoing silence of the inner stone halls was beginning to be faintly pierced by the sounds of the distant world, the whisper of desert air, the faint cry of a scavenger bird high above the plateau, subtle reminders of the reality that awaited his return. He clutched the cool stone of the passage walls, ensuring his footsteps were measured and rhythmic, carrying the perfected frequency of the heart coffer out into the chaos that constantly demanded cosmic order. The passage steepened, urging him upward, and soon he found himself re-entering the vast, soaring height of the Grand Gallery, a space now perceived entirely anew, its sheer scale no longer overwhelming, but comforting in its perfect, unchanging geometry. The corbelled walls and the high, polished ceiling, which before had seemed simply massive, now revealed themselves as a solidified chord struck by the very hand of Thoth, translating stellar mechanics into terrestrial stone. He understood profoundly that this gallery was not a pathway, but a resonant bridge, designed to hold the vibrational frequency of ascension, allowing the initiate's consciousness to calibrate itself against the measure of the gods before descending once more to the plane of human concern. As he moved along the ramps, his hands tracing the precise cut of the stone benches, he felt a subtle shift in the quality of the air itself, which began to lose the dry, mineral purity of the deeper chambers and adopt the fainter, earthier scent of dust and distant Nile water. This change signaled his approach to the regions maintained by human hands, the outer layers of the Great Temple, where the work of maintenance and temporal guardianship took place, demanding a transition from the ethereal contemplation back into the structured reality of his priesthood. He paused briefly, adjusting the folds of his linen garment, preparing his physical body to assume the mantle of leadership which had been stripped away during the pure, stark isolation of the inner work, recognizing that the external form must now reflect the internal illumination. He moved past the mouth of the descending passage, a path he had long since bypassed, which stood as a profound symbol of the path of material manifestation and the necessary descent into matter, yet he was focused now on the upward trajectory toward the light. The faint, wavering glimmer of the oil lamps placed intermittently by the outer guards marked the shift from absolute primal darkness into controlled, human-provided light, offering a gentle transition for eyes long accustomed to the luminous darkness of the higher consciousness. With every step, he consciously sealed the memory of the chamber behind him, ensuring that the wisdom gained remained a foundational element within his being, rather than a fleeting external vision subject to the dissipation of the sun's glare. With every step, he consciously sealed the memory of the chamber behind him, ensuring that the wisdom gained remained a foundational element within his being, rather than a fleeting external vision subject to the dissipation of the sun's glare. Soon, the smooth, relentless granite gave way to the rougher, older limestone of the main entranceway, indicating that he was crossing the threshold between the sacred enclosure and the profane world that clamored beyond the protective casing. Here he encountered the Silent Watcher, a venerable priest whose face was deeply etched with the hieroglyphs of time, one whose sole charge was to maintain the purity of the portal and offer the final, wordless challenge to the returning initiate. Their meeting was one of profound stillness, requiring no verbal exchange, for the Watcher's deep, discerning eyes searched not his attire or his scroll, but the very frequency vibrating in his heart, verifying the integrity of the inner transformation. The Watcher nodded, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, signaling approval and acknowledging the successful integration of the supreme lesson, then silently stepped aside, opening the final narrow path leading out into the sudden brightness. The sheer intensity of the desert sunlight, compressed into the frame of the narrow entrance, struck him with the force of a physical blow after the long seclusion in the stabilizing dark, requiring him to momentarily veil his eyes with his hand. This sudden, almost painful contrast served as the final, immediate teaching that the world outside was harsh, immediate, and demanding, and the internal peace must be strong enough to withstand its relentless assault. He took one final, measured breath, drawing the pure, cool air of the pyramid deep into his lungs one last time before stepping across the stone sill, emerging onto the vast, sun-drenched expanse of the Giza Plateau. The scale of the desert rushed upon him, the limitless golden sand stretching toward the horizon, the sharp, dry heat of the midday sun pressing upon his skin, the immediate roar of the external world rushing into the silence he had so carefully cultivated. He paused, anchoring his consciousness firmly within the stillness he had mastered, refusing to allow the sudden clamor, the distant sounds of hammer upon stone, the low murmur of the laborers, and the calls of the overseers to shake the foundations of his inner temple. Before him, gathered respectfully at a distance under the bright blue canopy of the sky, stood the assembled high council of priests and viziers, their expectant silence a palpable weight of communal anticipation, watching for the first sign of the initiated master. Their faces, though serious and lined with the responsibilities of temporal power, were illuminated by a subtle hope, seeking the cosmic reassurance that only the secrets of the great house could deliver, hungry for the new alignment that would guarantee the fertility of the land and the longevity of the dynasty. He knew that the moment of solitary contemplation was irrevocably over, and the arduous task of translating the sublime architecture of the cosmos into the actionable laws of men had begun, requiring him to be both the conduit and the shield for the divine will. He moved toward them with a slow, deliberate pace, his walk now imbued with a silent, magnetic authority derived not from rank but from absolute certainty, ensuring that every step was a deliberate act of communion between the inner world and the outer domain. He felt the vast weight of the pyramid itself extending outward through him, establishing a zone of calm and order around his presence, turning the chaotic activity of the plateau into a momentary, reverent tableau dedicated to the emergence of truth. The sun beat down fiercely upon the capstone, and he knew that just as the pyramid focused stellar energy, he must now focus the energy of divine wisdom, distributing it carefully and justly across the waiting fields of Egypt. His first task would be the pronouncement of the seasonal decrees, which, informed by the newly calibrated frequencies received in the heart chamber, would detail the timing of the Nile's inundation and the necessary preparations for planting. Vital actions determined not by mere observation, but by sacred celestial mathematics. He lifted his gaze toward the horizon, observing the distant, hazy greenness of the cultivated land bordering the barren desert. Understanding that the greatest secret of the pyramid was not immortality, but the perfect, unending cycle of death, transformation, and rebirth, mirroring the journey of the sun god himself. He carried the burden of maintaining this cosmic balance, ensuring that the ephemeral kingdom of men remained synchronized with the immutable laws written in the stars and sealed within the stone heart of the mountain.